Welcome back to the NoBS Show. My name is Josh. As you can tell, we got a new setup, some new lighting, and hopefully setting up some new audio equipment, webcam. Hey, we leveled up. So let's talk about these markets. So big question right now is now the time to buy? Is now the time to sell? What's going on? Tech had a big move. S&P's melting up, but it still feels like a very bearish environment. When I look at the fear and greed index, it's still sitting in extreme fear. So it's worrisome. The big thing to remember here is that markets don't crash when everyone's ready for a crash. If everyone's sitting in puts, market makers aren't going to print those puts. And especially today on the daily, massive volume on the puts. Saw like 80,000 puts on the 420 strike for SPY. And it's like that across the board with the market. So today it kind of felt like a short squeeze. It even got me. I know lots of people got burned today. I got burned today too. I was trying to play some puts. I ended up holding those pass in hopes that the press conference would go poorly, which it did go poorly. We'll talk about that in a second, along with energy. Ended up getting a little bit of a better exit there. And then, day was saved by uranium spiking, which was fantastic. But what's going on here? And is it now the time to buy? Now, off the technicals, this looks like we could have a few weeks of an upswing. And especially since we just got an announcement that Amazon's doing a 20-to-1 stock split and a share buyback program, it's definitely looking like this could be a setup for a bullish environment for the time being. I still feel very bearish. I still think that there's tons of negative headlines that could hit this market. And I do think that if the market starts to melt up, it'll put it more in a position of a crash risk as put holders get burned out of their positions. All that said, I kind of begrudgingly feel like now's a good time to buy. Now, am I going to go big on it? No. And in fact, I'm looking more for dips on energy, which I wanted to talk about. We had the press conference today. And the big thing to understand here is we are not doing the thing. We're not doing the things that are best for energy, for our allies, and for us, and for prices. And the second thing is we're definitely also not doing what's best for the environment. And I've reiterated this. I can't even tell you how many times, but it feels like the people who are in charge of decision making right now act in a way that they are better than you, they know better than you, and they're not going to listen to you. Because if you think we should drill oil, then you don't believe in global warming and you don't need to be heard. So, but that's not the case here, right? Because the case here is naivety and the fact that oil is on the global market. And when you produce less, bad actors produce more, they do more damage to the environment. So actually the best thing you could do is use your cleaner methods to supplement that production. And in the future, just hope that they follow suit. This, because you're just not doing any good on the net increase in the carbon footprint. So even from an environmental stance, it just doesn't hold up. And from the energy standpoint, I mean, obviously it doesn't hold up. I mean, look at these prices. We're an energy independent nation, yet we're still seeing price squeezes, and we're not allowing even the utilization of our natural reserves. And we keep cutting back on all these policies. And we have these ESG goalposts that are completely disconnected from the reality of our technologies. But it's widespread how much this misinformation is, though. People truly believe that if you just do a big stimulus package and build solar panels everywhere, that will supplement for our energy. That's just a complete fantasy that is entirely disconnected from where the technology's at. We're at a huge. There needs to be a like from VH to DVD type of innovation in this energy to get the amount of energy output that we would need to create stable infrastructure. And I'm not an engineer, but all the engineers I have spoken to have reiterated this to me. And by the way, check out the Discord. We have a whole networking system in there so that you could talk to different professionals in different areas. And the big thing with this that really bothers me is, I saw a podcast with 4 billionaires talk about this issue, and they were just completely clueless to the reality of the situation. And we have technologies that, in fact, could supplement for this, but we have governmental policies in place that make that process impossible. And I've talked about this, I don't even know how many times, so I'm not going to sit on it too long. But, when I'm thinking about energy in the greater conversation rather than just the price action that's been occurring over the past few days, I think these prices are for sure going to be persistently high. The only way I see that changing is if the people who are doing decision making come to the realization that they're wrong and they don't know better than everyone else, and they've shown no indication that they would come to that conclusion in any way, shape, or form, even when there's a massive inflation in prices, because there's a plethora of things that they can pass the blame off on for what are the real underlying issues. And I'm not saying that Russia and Ukraine didn't have impacts to these energy prices, but to act like this is a one-off instance and not a persistent issue that's been plaguing us is ludicrous. It's nonsensical. So that's what I think about energy in particular. And honestly, with this market, just in general, I think that we could see energy sell off some more and we could see techs pick up. I'm thinking we're going to see chop in energy, a dangerous chop, mind you. Volatility is going to be high. And probably, yeah, I think a lot of these tech stocks are about to probably perform well. And there's a few that I've definitely have my eye on, some that aren't even in tech. And we've also seen good performance out of the biotechs lately. And I have some allocations in those because of high conviction. Regardless of everything else occurring in the world, I think that will be persistently high. Zoom had decent earnings and it was has been kind of slowly melting up. TDOC did well, is at lows, still a good company. Roku had supply chain issues, still a good company. Really cheap stock, was way oversold after earnings. Snow had that big sell off. It's looking like there might be an opportunity there. These massive inflows that we saw today, I think could come back again tomorrow. Now, what would derail this? What would derail this is that these increasing energy prices hit the inflation tape way higher than expected. And it runs way hotter. Now, remember, the consensus from the market is that this actually starts to come down heading into the summer. That inflation numbers will naturally come down. When you throw in all the ripple effects of the sanctions, first of all, if they do show up on the tape, that is really concerning because it means they've hit this sooner than even I expected. If they don't, I do think that in the next few months could surprise to the upside, and that inflation could also be run a lot hotter than we think it will, which means that if we do see a slowdown, inflation might be so high that the Fed still feels pushed to tackle that inflation and to raise interest rates into a recession. And the argument for a global recession at this point is extensive. And that's just high energy prices, shortages on fertilizer, which then leads to shortages on food. And you have the Russia and Ukraine producing most of the wheat, and this food is global. So, and they're going to miss a planting cycle along with the supply they have being destroyed. We already are stacking this on top of supply chain issues that we're starting to resolve, but weren't resolved yet. So now you have, like, if you work in logistics right now, I bet your salary just doubled because the need for logistics professionals to make all these new supply chains and plan all this out and reorganize this complete restructuring of the global infrastructure and even just the geopolitics of the treaties and trade agreements that exist between nations is huge. It's very extensive. And speaking to that, I do want to revisit energy one more time because I just want to paint the picture of how extreme we're going out of just to appease prices without utilizing our own resources. And we're about to sign a nuclear deal with Iran that basically says, hey, yeah, make nuclear weapons and make dirtier oil than we do so that we don't have to make our cleaner oil so that prices will come down. That's basically what we're saying. We would prefer They have a nuclear weapon. Keep in mind that the reason we can't just go over to Russia and say, hey, bad boy, Putin, don't do that, it's because he has nukes. So when he lines up his tanks to invade someone, we can't just go over there and smack him because he's got nukes. He's the bully on the playground. And he could easily go to another country, line up his tanks, say, hey, do you care about this country enough to go to nuclear war with me? That's the reality of the questions that we're going to have to probably continually answer. At what point would we even give on that? Russia's dealt with sanctions before. And Russia's historically done well when it comes to just needing to live off its own land and resources. Remember, this is the resource hub of the world. More natural resources and reserves than all the other world powers combined. Okay, so there is a little bit of wagering here of who gives first. And there's all sorts of other theories that go behind everything that's going on. And I'm not downplaying what happened in Ukraine. A sovereign nation should never be invaded. But we just saw Zelensky come out and be like, no, I didn't actually. There was nothing wrong with the nuclear reactor. I was just trying to start a nuclear war. And people are excusing that, like, well, his nation's under attack. It's like, man, if they did that in the Middle East, when we were attacking them, they would be total villains. If we were invading the Middle East, if they weren't letting men leave the country and having them go to war and fight us, like they would be villains. If they were arming civilians and using them as human shields, they would be villains. But the narrative has this as a good thing. I'm not pro-Russia, but I am anti. And, this is the NoBS show. I mean, so I like to keep it real here. All right, we keep it real in the markets. We keep it real with what's going on geopolitically and in the world. And I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. War is dirty. War is terrible. But I do think that there is definitely a perspective shift that's occurring here, and no one's willing to acknowledge it. I think a few people are. And I just want to be on that side because I think that's the reality of what I see. So, and it's interesting to talk about. You could completely disagree with me, think I'm evil for even mentioning that, and that's fine. I totally respect that. Maybe I am off base. So, that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now in this environment. I do think that with the extra pressures on food and stuff, the likelihood that China actually invades Taiwan decreases significantly. Doesn't look like there's a high likelihood that occurs. Although I think that we're far from seeing the end of what could be the worst in the situation with Ukraine. I think the capital city is about to get flattened, very sadly. So I think that we could have a breath here to the upside and the markets. Again, I still think that there's so many things that could set off these headlines. I still think the Fed's in a really tough position. I think the entire situation right now has become more complex. But based on the technicals and the way the option mechanics function in this market environment, I do think that we could see more of a squeeze effect on all these shorts. We could see them get burned out, and we could just see this market melt up against all expectations. I do think that later in the year as well, especially if these geopolitical tensions start to really decouple and we see accelerate, maybe we see China make a move. Of course, we'll continue to see bonds perform well. But I also think that there is a potentiality for the dollar milkshake theory to start playing out, and then you start to see this market melt up against all expectations. And that'll be bewildering, but it'll be just a symptom of money wanting to hide in the U.S., which is very common when you see global turmoil. And a big asset there will also be gold. And I should mention gold because I still think that gold's in a very bullish uptrend. And I think that will also persist. I don't see any reason for that not to persist when inflation's high, geopolitics are high. We're going to continue to see mentions of stagflation here and there, and that's gold. That's what gold loves. Gold loves high inflation, no growth, and that's what stagflation is. That's it for tonight. Hope you enjoyed the NoBS show. Make sure to check out the link in the bio. Check out the Discord. Hope you found this helpful. And I'll see you in the next episode, or in the Discord stream, or in future streams coming soon when this guy gets to crack a lackin'.